The audio grind.
Now then, everyone, welcome to the Audio Grind episode 7. We're going to be continuing our chat today about the signal chain of recording guitars, and we're gonna wrap it up with the back end of the chain, aren't we? So we're thinking about talking about real amps, modelling gear, and plugins.
Sure, for sure.
So we're spoiled for choice these days, aren't we? We've got all of these options that we've got available to us. Each have their pros and cons. I mean, we both record guitars fairly prolifically, don't we, for a living? Mm-hmm. So we're kind of well experienced with what does what, I guess. So hit me. Real amps, modelers, plugins.
Well,
pros and cons.
Well, I think with this kind of with this kind of thought process and what we're talking about now, we have to be super careful. We don't just rehash the sample drums versus real drums argument, because it's one of these things where there's pros and cons, like you said, to every single aspect of this thing. It's not like it was in the early 2000s and the 90s, where these kind of modeling amps and these Sims were fucking garbage and only used by industrial metal bands because they wanted it to sound shit. It's not the case anymore. Yeah. I mean, you can get away with using modeling amps for pretty much any genre now, and you can't tell. So I think there's definitely pros and cons for both. I use both, even though I've got like fucking loads of amp heads and stuff. I still do use both. I think the main one, which I think everybody can relate to, is cost. Like, obviously, a neural DSP plugin is an absolute fraction of the cost of a Mesa triple, You've got a Mesa yourself, I've got a Mesa. They're not fucking cheap machines. Not even to buy and to maintain, it's just as expensive. I mean, you can buy some pretty decent plugins nowadays which can get you pretty much 90% of the way there.
Yep.
I mean, I know you're using Axe Effects as well as your Mesa, so obviously you're kind of embracing the hybrid. For me, I mean, this is going to kind of bridge two of our points together, but I think it definitely needs to be said. So a couple of weeks ago, and I remember calling you about this, the tubes on my Mesa triple just all went, like every single one of them. I don't know if they'd been going slowly.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd not noticed. And if anybody's watching, think, how the fuck does he not notice if your tubes are going? It's because it happens so gradually. And obviously, I'm in here all day. Like, it just started sounding shitter and shitter and shitter, and to the point where I sent some guitar tracks over to you, and you was like, mate, these sound fucking wank. What's going on? And I was like, yeah,
I remember. It sounded like they'd had a blanket thrown over them.
Real bad, but it's because it was such a gradual... Oh, shit, just whacked my mic. Such a gradual kind of, degradation of the tone. I didn't notice.
Yeah.
So we got it checked out. I think every single bar one tube had just gone. Like, either gone, was pretty much on the way out, or was unusable. There was one tube which was usable, but you might as well do a full revalve at this point.
Yeah, completely.
Price point, 500, I can't remember if it was dollars, euros or pounds, but they're all pretty much the same nowadays, give or take.
500 is 500, isn't it?
500. It was a fucking whack. So...
Shit, that's for a full revalve of a Mesa triple rec?
Revalve, yeah, of a Mesa triple rec. I can't remember how many tubes is in it,
wow.
But I remember there being over 15 tubes, there's probably like 20, 24 tubes in that thing. In the dual, like you've got, I'm not quite sure. I think there's maybe a couple less, but still, you're still looking at around that price point if you had to revalve yours fully. And
yeah, because I know that with the triple, there's 3 rectifier valves, so there should be 3 5 RU4 valves, and I think for each rectifier valve there's 2 6L6s, so I think yours should have 3 more power valves than mine, and I'm not sure if it has 1 or 2 more 12AX7 preamp valves.
Oh, I don't know. It was,
but it's either way, it's definitely got more valves under the hood.
Yeah, and so basically, I mean, I don't know about you, but being a small business, I mean, we go through all these monthly expenditures, strings, subscriptions for plugins, if you're doing that sort of thing. I can't just lay down that every fucking couple of months, 500 quid. It's a fucking lot of money. So, obviously, I've just... this is a tangent, but I've been buying vintage keyboards, fucking transformed a drum kit into an electronic kit, expenses. So I can't fucking
of course,
I can't fucking revalve it.
I would say that in terms of pros and cons, the maintenance of a valve amplifier is one of the major cons. Yeah. And just to sort of expand on your point of revalving, obviously one of the main reasons these days that valves are so expensive is that I think there only 2 factories in the world that make these valves. One is in Russia, and I think the other's in China.
I think so. I'm not quite. That's what I was told, but that I don't quote me on that. But I'm pretty sure that's the case. Is one of them's in Russia.
But I mean, if that's the case, and one's in Russia, one's in China, I mean, it's no fucking wonder that they're all so expensive, is it? At the minute, with what's kind of kicking off. So yeah, I mean, that is a major factor. Another thing that kind of now I'm used to sort of like recording with digital gear a lot. When I do plug the Mesa in, one of the things that kind of, I guess, it doesn't bug me, I guess, because it's just you accept that it's part of the ceremony, but it goes back to that idea of, there is a ceremony surrounding recording real amplifiers. And it's that I know that I've got to warm those tubes up, and yes, you can flick the amp on and let it sit there for 10 minutes, but that doesn't warm it up. No. I mean, in order to properly warm it up, you need to be passing signal through it, so you need to be running it, pretty much where you're going to run it in the session. So I would probably play for 20 minutes, half an hour, and I guess, that does get me a chance to sort of get limber and get warmed up and stuff like that. But it's things like if I record a bunch of guitars and then I go for some lunch or whatever, or I go for a cup of tea or whatever, I know that I've got to get my valves cooking again. I can't just come back in and play if the amp has been sort of sat still doing nothing for half an hour or an hour. Then I've got to get it back up to cooking temperature, because that's where your tone is. That's why you would want to be using a vamp amplifier, a valve amplifier in the first place, because you're looking for that little bit of extra, and whether or not that little bit of extra exists is still something that is completely open to debate. Yeah. But major con for me is the entire valve thing. Obviously, hugely expensive to maintain, and they do need to be warmed up, and they also need to be cooled down as well.
And I think there's another one which I think when I was writing notes for this episode, I completely didn't even cross my mind. But it's recording the thing. I mean, I know this jumps onto a whole different topic, but when you have valves, you've got volume. Like you've got to have either the facilities to, you stick a microphone in front of this thing, or buy an attenuator, which is the route I went down, because I'm recording here. I know you are as well, but we're recording here all day from morning till night with these amps. I could probably get away with it in my area doing it maybe once or twice a day, but for the amount of time, for the duration at that volume, I'd be getting an ASBO. They'd be fucking taking me away. Do you know what I mean? So
completely.
I couldn't do it.
I mean, I used to be a bit of a bastard, really. I used to live in a 1-bedroomed flat in the city centre.
Fucking know, I remember when I was there last, honestly, I'm like, came to see you and you was like cranking it.
Yeah, no, I used to. This thing that's behind me, you've got the oversized Recto cabinet and a Mesa dual rec, and it was when I was first working for Axis R Us, and we were tracking everything through. Well, pretty much everything. We've got a couple of amps, but a lot, most of the high gain stuff would end up going through the boogie. And back then, I was like, right, if you've got a valve amplifier, if you've got a Mesa Boogie dual rec, the only way you can record it is flat out. So I used to be running this thing flat out in a 1-bedroom flat, and there was somebody lived directly below me, and there was a cafe below that. So I mean, like, the walls used to fucking shake, man. It was like
I remember coming around to yours. This was years ago when I was first getting into it. I came to drop you some fucking software off or something. Like, I mean, this must have been way over.
You did, yeah,
way over 10 years ago. We're talking like what, 13 years ago?
It'll have been 2013, so it'll be about 9 years ago.
Hell. But yeah, and I remember you're like, oh, come and have a look at my amp. Turning it on, I was like, mate, does nobody get pissed off with that? He was like, nah, they're all right with it.
I mean, I was fortunate enough at the time to live above a guy who was a bit of a metalhead, and it didn't really bother him. So, I mean, he says it didn't bother him, but I mean, like, I don't know. It must have done, because, I mean, if you're doing a session for a couple of hours and you're getting a Mesa Boogie cooking, I mean, like, he will have felt that in his toes, you know what I mean? They are thunderously loud. And the thing is, I mean, I've only actually recorded the cabinet where I am now a couple of times. I have a room that I can put the cabinet in. So I run a really long speaker wire from the head. I keep the head in the control room. And I put the cab in the other smaller room and mic it up that way. But the problem with that is the light that we have in the kitchen was vibrating so badly that it was going to come off the walls. Wow. It was, you could see it physically, like, especially if I was playing like chugging on it. If I was like dun 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 whatever, you could see the casing of the light just shaking. And I thought, this is going to come off.
Holy fuck. Yeah, well, me and Graziano, we toyed around with the idea of creating an ISO room. Like, so at first we was going to build an ISO cabin. The size we were going to need, because we'd have to make it to fit all of our amps, so it needed to be big, because obviously we've got combos as well. And, we'd look at the dimensions of the super reverb and, like all the cabs we've got. And it was like, nah, let's just make a fucking... like just a room, and we looked at it, and it was just going to be a ridiculous amount of time and effort, and it probably wasn't going to work that good. So we ended up just getting the attenuator, the two notes, the reload, which they don't make anymore. Yeah, but we just got the Big Daddy fucking reload, and I've not noticed a difference. If anything, it's been nothing but like better than miking it up, more control in it.
Yeah, I mean. The thing is, I mean, like what you've just said there about using the two-note stuff, it completely negates the issue of having to run your amp insanely. I mean, you can still run it insanely hot, but what you don't get as a byproduct of that of that power is insane volume. Yeah. The signal has been essentially, going into a load box, and then we're able to transfer that signal into the interface, where we're going to probably use some sort of like cabinet IR. We'll come back to cab IR shortly, but like that is the main way that I record my Mesa now. I mean, I don't have the reload, but I've got the capture.
It's the same technology, though, isn't it?
The chip. I think so. I mean, I don't know. I've not got much experience. Well, I've got no experience with the reload, but I mean, the amp coming in sounds great once you sort of put an IR on it. And one of the things that I definitely do think with the standard of IRs these days, they sound better than I could capture it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I don't have ribbon mics. No. I have a limited selection of microphones. As much as I'm running a studio business, I'm not running like a super high-end studio business. Do you know what I mean? I haven't got condensers coming out of my arsehole. So, I mean, I'd probably be looking at using a 57. And, I mean, I don't even have anything like a C414.
Yeah, because they're expensive as fuck, mate. I mean, you can get clones that are pretty decent. Yeah. I think... I can't remember the manufacturer, but there's a manufacturer that does a fucking shit-hot clone of a C414. That's amazing. But even then, you're still looking at a couple of hundred. I mean... Yeah. It's not to be sniffed at. And just for recording a cab... But anyway, we're talking about cab recordings here, and we're talking about heads.
Yeah. We're digressing. Yeah. We're digressing. So, obviously, we've just addressed some of the cons of using a valve amplifier. I don't want to kind of hate on them too much, because I do still go towards it for a lot of stuff. I mean, I was using it in a session a few days ago, and I was having a really great time. Like the joy that I get from interacting with a real amplifier is there. It's still very much there, and I do feel like this thing responds to me. I just feel more connected to it, if that makes sense. I probably sound like some kind of wanky guitar player at this point, but you feel part of it, whereas there is a little bit of a disconnect still with the digital stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there is an awesome ceremony, like what you said before about setting a guitar amp up and being able to sit there and twist things exactly and not using a mouse to control things. And It does just feel better, and you can sit there and play guitar while you're changing these things. And I don't know if this is just nostalgia, but I genuinely do think they have some sort of extra thing going on than an amp sim, even though amp sims are fucking amazing now. I mean, I still get an unbelievable amount of joy as firing up the fucking Vox, and getting that really bright tone. I mean, using a sim, it can get it, but is it the same? I don't know.
You can get, I mean, like, one of my arguments would be, is the joy coming from the tone or is the joy coming from the feeling? Yeah. Because what I will say is, if I record that doing like a sort of, bog standard, chuggy, rocky, metally track, and I record, maybe one of my higher gain patches on the Axe Effects, that maybe is like a model of this, by the time you've got them sat side by side in a mix, then maybe you've got your doubles left and right or your quad tracks left and right, you're not noticing a lot of difference.
No, absolutely. I completely agree with you on that. And anybody that says they can pull that apart in a mix, I think is fucking lying, to be quite honest.
Maybe they can, but I mean, it's just different. And I think a lot of the sort of joy of recording a real amp comes from the feeling and comes from the sensation. And maybe there's something to be said about that improving your performance, because if you do feel more engaged, if you do feel like the amplifier is talking to you more, like it's responding to your every move more, then maybe that gets a better take out of you if you're recording something like intricate lead guitar parts or whatever.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
fair. But in terms of actual tone, I mean, like, you can get insane tone from that. You can get insane tone from an Axe Effects, and there's so many options now for modelling equipment. Obviously you've got Axe Effects is a big one. That's what I use. You've got Kempers out there. Yeah. You've got Line 6 Helix coming to the party now, and sort of they've brought out their advanced modeler, which is supposed to be their competition for the likes of Fractal and Kemper. And now you've got Neural DSP with the Quad Cortex. Yeah. They've sort of built upon their empire where they've sort of started off with plugins and stuff like that.
I mean, I think we've kind of shat on plugins a little bit in this one, because I definitely think they do have the place. And to follow on from our Mesa story, which I'm quite glad you interjected and split it to this part of the this section of the conversation, because it makes more sense in this context. But since my Mesa hasn't been working, I've been using a plugin to replace it, and not one person has noticed. Nobody said anything. It was a plugin that pretty much not very many people was using. It was that free Stevie T one, but if you paid an extra 20 quid, it gave you some extra different fucking amps, and I ended up trying. So
what's it a model of?
This one's a model of the it's called the Rectal Fire, which is a model of the the rectifier, obviously. But it sounds,
I mean, he's missed a trick there. He should have called it the Rectum Fryer.
Yeah, well, Rectal Fire is still pretty good. Do you know?
Rectal Fire.
Rectal Fire, which is, it's still pretty.
All right, yeah, that's pretty good.
The UI is like a cardboard box version of the Mesa, and I mean the cabs, the cab IRs in it aren't too great, but fucking hell, mate, it's 80-90% of the way there, and in a mix, nobody's noticed, and it is proper for the, it was cheaper than revalving my amp, and it's just kind of coasting me along for now. So it's kind of difficult to shit on something that has saved my ass, basically.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, there's definitely place for plugins. I think you're probably a little bit more experienced with me than the plugins, because my chain is more modelling, and if it's a rail amp, it's probably going to be that. But I mean, most of my guitar parts that I record are done using the Axe Effects. What I love about that process now is the ease of use.
Absolutely.
Obviously, I'm not sat here waiting for valves to warm up. I'm not sat there waiting for valves to cool down when I finish the session so that I can turn the amplifier off. If I go and have some lunch, I don't have to get my valves warm again. I never have to replace the valves. No. So it's low maintenance. Well, it's practically no maintenance. And what I've kind of built up is, over a number of years now, about 40 really, really workable user presets that I've just constructed, which is just like just the amp block. I'm only using the amp block.
Yeah.
So if there's any drive pedals to hit the amp first, I use those in analog. So I'll either use the Maxon OD9 or I'll use the pedal that I've started using over the last few months that I've kind of started working from a company called Sutton Instruments, and I'm using their Del Fuego pedal as a boost to hit the front end of the amplifier. But in the actual amp itself, I will have like a really workable Vox preset, so like a classic AC30 sound. I'll have a classic JCM 800 sound. I'll have a Plexi sound. I'll have a Boogie sound, a Soldado sound. Any amp that's ever been worth its salt. I have a preset where like it, if I'm like working on a track, recording a track, I'll think, right, this would really benefit this kind of sound. I've got a preset that I can just pull up there and then and maybe make a few tweaks, gain down a bit or up a bit, or maybe just a little bit of like EQ shaping or whatever, but it's normally absolutely minimal. And then I'm away. And then before I know it, I'm recording, and I can come through here, fire up, and within 5 minutes I'm doing takes, which totally appeals to me.
And what I think as well is amazing is the recall. Because, I mean, with real amps, I know you can leave the knobs in the same place, but it just doesn't sound the same. You fire it up the next day, it just doesn't. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a thing with the heat of the components. Mesas are a bastard for it. You can set up a Mesa day, then the next day it'll sound different, and it's a fucking arsehole when you're recording.
It is.
If you recorded an album for somebody, the guitars will sound different on each song, and not because you've changed anything. It just does.
It's true. I feel like this amplifier has got a personality. And I feel like in many ways, it's like I'm in a relationship with it. Because it's like some days she loves me, and some days, for whatever reason, she just doesn't.
Yeah. It's a nightmare. But yeah, with a plugin, you click low preset, or if you've, working on a session, it sounds the same as it did yesterday. But with an amp, it does. I mean, it can be really good for different kind of, if you're doing different songs and stuff and it sounds a little bit different, it's cool to have that, dare I say it, that soul, that, slightly different each time, and it reacts to different guitars differently. But sometimes you don't want that, especially with like the heavier stuff, and especially if you're doing a fucking album that's supposed to be like kind of technical, where things are supposed to be a specific sound. But
and really consistent.
Yeah, really consistent. I mean, I don't know if it's just our amp heads are fucked, but that's just my analysis of it. No,
I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I think it's one of those things in it where, like, in an ideal world, it's nice to have both options. Yeah. And there isn't a better or a worse. It's just what kind of works for you and what kind of works for the budget that you're operating at. Like, it's really, really nice to be able to jack into that, and I get total joy from it. It makes me feel alive and it makes me feel powerful. Does it mean I'm recording better sounding guitar parts? I really aren't sure. I really aren't certain. But it's lovely to have. Do you mind if I tell the story of this amp?
Yeah, go on then. Tell it.
So I've had this amp from brand new. I bought this amp in summer 2009. And I really, really wanted one because, back then, before I sort of started working in the guitar parts industry so much, I guess I was a little bit of a victim of branding and marketing, So I grew up as a big Dream Theater fan, so I was listening to John Petrucci, and obviously he's like a Mesa poster boy. So I always wanted the sort of flagship dual rectifier. So I'd started working as a guitar teacher, and I was still living at home with my mum. So basically, I had quite a bit of expendable income, and I'd saved a few quid up, and I was with a girl at the time that was really, really desperate to sort of move out, maybe get our own place. And I wasn't really that up for the idea. So she knew I had a few quid put by. And I just thought, I'm just going to get rid of it. I'm going to get rid of this money. So basically I can just go, there's no money. Sorry, the money's gone. So I went and spent 3,600 quid on a brand new Mesa dual rectifier solo head with the oversized 4x12 cab. And I was like, sorry, love, money's disappeared.
I bet she fucking hated you for that. That bastard.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a bit of a piece of shit way of going about it. I understand that now, but yeah. Anyway, so I had this amp for years. It was great. It always served me really, really well. And then, as digital technology improved, I started using more and more of that. Going more to, I mean, like even things like bias. I was practicing using bias.
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't mind it so much. I even used it on a few guitar recordings that I provided for clients around that time. Then it went more and more towards Axe effects and stuff, and I just found that this thing was just sat in the corner gathering dust. And I had a student at the time that was really, really kind of hot to buy this amplifier off me. And he every week he'd come down and he'd be like, you want to go sell me your Mesa, and I was like, oh no, I can't, it's my amp, I love it. And he's like, well, as soon as you're ready to sell me it, I'm here, I'll take it off your hands. So I'm like, oh fucking hell. And I kind of thought probably the day would come, you know what I mean? With every passing week, it was just like of less and less significance to me because it's just gathering dust in the corner of a room. And then one day he says, you're going to flog me your amp? And I was like, you know what? As I was getting more and more into mixing, recording, things like that, I thought, because he'd offered me $2,000, I thought $2,000 would be like, I could spend money on like a new computer, I could get some new monitors. I can't remember exactly how I upgraded the studio, but I took that money that I got from the amplifier and reinvested it into the studio, and he bought it off me. So anyway, a couple of years goes by, he's had the amp for a few years. The band he was in had split up by this point.
Oh.
So he's finding he's got exactly the same problem that I had. He's now got this like ridiculously powerful Mesa Boogie Dual Rate that's sat in the corner of the room gathering dust. So he comes to me and he says, look, I'm not gigging. I'm not going to be gigging anytime in the near future, but there's a pickup truck I want. So I'm like, right, okay. So he says, so I want to get rid of the amp. Do you know anybody who might be interested? Obviously he knows I'm connected with a lot of guitar players. So I'm like, well, I can put some feelers out for you. How much are you looking for? He says, well, I'm looking for I'd take 1,600 quid for the full thing. And I'm like, right, okay. And I'm thinking, well, he might get a buyer at 1,600. And then he says, however, I'm like, oh God, here we go. He says, if you want to take it back off me, you can have the full thing, head and cab for $1,000.
Oh, Jesus.
I know. So I was like, oh man, really? I was like, you can't do this to me. And he was like, I'm doing it to you. I was like, fuck's sake. And he said, like, look, it's like, I know it's your baby. You had it from brand new. Like, it's never really, it's always felt like your amp. It's never really felt entirely like it was my amp. And I says to him, look, you do realise that I'm going to have to buy this back off you, don't you? And he's just like, well, it's fine. Like, I'd rather have the money than the amp sat there gathering dust. So I'm like, you do also realise that I've completely had your pants down and fucking had you over a barrel here. And he's like, yeah, I know. But I was just like, look, this is too good to be true. So I just paid him up and was just like, right, welcome home. She's never going anywhere ever again. She's never leaving me.
Fucking hell. It's been about a bit, but...
It has, yeah. But yeah, that's the story of the boogie.
Yeah. And I want to finish up on just a little bit of a story. This kind of rounds up the discussion quite nicely, actually.
Okay.
So you went back to bias. You mentioned bias and these kind of...
Yes.
I mean, I know, like, bias at the time was fucking shit hot. I mean, you look at it now, and I think it sounds terrible. I don't think it sounds great at all. But
no,
you kind of have to look at what bias was made for. Was it made for professional studios or not? So, with that argument in mind, like, obviously Graziano, the owner of most of the equipment in this room, especially some of the nicer amps and stuff, if it bothers you that maybe you don't have access to guitar heads or you don't have access to these kind of things, Graziano is a man that owns all this stuff, but will sit and play a pod every single night. The old, you know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Like the kidney bean?
The old kidney bean pod. It's sat in the next room where he has a sofa and a TV. You know where the drum kit is? There's a sofa and a TV in that next room.
So what, is he just jacking with his headphones?
Jackson with his headphones. Every single night, we'll fall asleep playing that.
Jeez.
And I have to literally force him to come into this room. And it's like, oh, I've set this up differently, or, what do you think to this sound? Let's plug the high watt in. And he's like, no, I'll just sitting there, and he'll just take his PRS or he'll take his whatever he wants to play, and he'll literally every single night play his pod. And I know everyone probably in the comments going, "Oh, Line 6 pods are shit." Yeah, they are shit. But were they made for a professional studio? No, there wasn't. The same as the
It's a very good point.
The Line 6 Spider. Was that made for recording? No. Is it, and still is, the best bedroom guitar player's tool in the world? Yes, it absolutely fucking is. It's an amazing piece of equipment.
I agree, yeah. And I guess the thing is, they've sort of been a bit of a victim of their own success because it was almost as if like the pod was actually that good that it started... Well, it was that good at being, a practice tool and a bedroom amplifier that it started being compared to, and unfairly compared to, like valve heads. You can't compare a pod to a fucking JCM 800 stack. No. But yeah, I mean, in that regard, it's completely unfair. But yeah, I guess what you're saying makes total sense. For what they did and what they continue to do, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, how long ago? I don't know how long ago it was when they brought out the Line 6 Spider. But I remember my friend bringing one round to my house because I only had like a fucking 15-watt practice amp at this point. I'd only just started playing guitar, so it must have been a long, long time ago this came out. And he brought around this amp that had all these lights on it, and it had effects on it, and it had this insane tone, which when you're fucking 13 is the coolest sound in the world.
Oh yeah, insane mode.
Yeah. I mean, when you're a kid and you're listening to Avenged Sevenfold, that is the coolest shit in the world. And it's got phaser on it, flanger on it, all these delays. Now it'll ever beat that for a kid in the bedroom. I mean, you can get fucking plugins and all this shit, but for somebody who doesn't know how to do that, if you want to use a dial, and move things around and physically interact with it, then it's absolutely fantastic bit of kit. It's interesting, because you mentioned about the Spider. One of my old students, and now a good friend of mine who I do a lot of work with, she had a Line 6 Spider amplifier, which I'd recommended to her dad to get her as as a sort of a bedroom tool. Because, I knew she wasn't going to be out gigging anytime soon, and I knew that she didn't need anything particularly powerful. She just needed something that, she could have access to a lot of sounds in that was compact, and, this amplifier was perfect. So she has this amp, and then a few years later, bearing in mind at this point she's a young lass, so I think she'd have been about 15 or 16 at this point. And basically, she decided that she wanted an orange Micro Terra for Christmas. So her dad's come to me and said, she wants this orange Micro Terra. Is it worth it? And I'm like, well, why does she want that? He says, well, she's having the piss took out of her because she's got this amp. So I spoke to her about it. And I was just like, why do you want this orange amp? This is a bit overkill. It's a bit ridiculous. And she's just like, well, everyone's taking the piss out of my Line 6 Spider because they're shit. There's all these memes taking the piss out of them. And obviously, as a young lass, she didn't want to be associated with that because it wasn't cool to own a Line 6. But it's funny, isn't it? The stigma that, society can impose on, even shit like owning a Line 6 amp, even though it's really good at what it does. Yeah. It's honestly, I see endless YouTube videos about it, saying the Line 6 Spider shit and all. Yeah. Going back to the point previously, it wasn't fucking built for studio recording. It was built to stick your headphones on with. That's what it was fucking built for. It wasn't built to record your band's next fucking album. It was built to record your band's next demo. But that was it. That was all it was built for. Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a sort of a nice place to round things off there. I mean, all I would sort of say in a summarising sign-off statement. That was a nice sentence, wasn't it? Summarising sign-off really statement. Is, I guess, it all boils down to budget. If you're looking to sort of get set up and you're looking for a cost-effective way or a more cost-effective way of recording, high-grade guitars, professional quality guitars, if you had £1,000 to go out and spend on something, to process your guitar signal, I would go digital, personally.
Absolutely.
It's got everything that you can dream of, really, and it's low maintenance or no maintenance. You aren't waiting for valves to warm up, and the quality now is that good. I mean, you could go out on the second-hand market and get like an older XFX 2, or you could get like one of the older Kempers. I mean, I'm not sure what the Neuro DSP Quad Cortex is going out for on the second-hand market, but there's got to be a point now where there'll probably be a few kicking around on eBay.
I think
so. It'd be interesting.
I think, like in this, especially if you kind of trying to do the job that we're doing, I think you have to be what's the word? You have to be versatile. And if you can only
adaptable,
if you can only buy one amp that can do one thing, you're not going to be versatile. Yeah. And people like clients want versatility. You're never going to get.
Absolutely.
You're never going to set up a Fiverr page and say metal productions only, because people aren't going to come to you for just metal. There's people of all different shapes and sizes and all different genres coming. So versatility is absolutely like the number one thing. So you've got to think of it that way.
Completely agree, man. Completely agree. So I think we'll leave things there. As always, talk to us. Drop us a comment. If you have anything to say, if you agree with what we're saying, if you disagree with what we're saying, if you are incredibly pro-analog and you think that, you know, there is this sort of like mystique and majesty in the tone, let us know in the comments. And as always, subscribe. Get it fucking subscribe.
Subscribe, because only
subscribe to it.
Under 50% of people that watch us are subscribed. And I'm going to say this at the end of every video until everyone's fucking subscribed. Under 50% are subscribed. Do it.
You've been told.
The audio grind.